Welcome to Brandon Hall Group's Excellence at Work podcast. You will hear from industry leaders covering innovative, cutting-edge business, learning, and HR topics that weave current market research and technology into each episode. Our Excellence at Work podcast is hosted by Brandon Hall Group's Chief Operating Officer and Principal HCM Analyst, Rachel Cook. Welcome to our Excellence at Work podcast. I'm Rachel Cook, and with me today, I have Drew Remiker, the Senior Director of Strategic Services from NovoEd. Welcome, Drew. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. It's a delight to be here.
It's a delight to have you, and it's been a little bit over a month since we have last been together, and that was during our HCM Excellence Conference, and that was a lot of it was a great event, and we appreciate your support and sponsorship and partnership. We're also excited to have you and your team again join us next year for 2025 as another gold sponsor. So save the date for those of you that are listening in. Our event is going to take place January 28th through the 30th at the same location in Palm Beach, Florida. So Drew, I hope you're also going to be joining us next year.
Yeah, I'm hoping I'll have a new suit, maybe something even fancier this time. But no, thanks for having us. We always enjoy that event, and it's quite an extravaganza. You all know how to make a gala feel special.
Thank you, and we try to up it a little bit each year, and so we welcome all feedback. And I love that you're thinking about what you're wearing next year, because I think that's part of the fun. Not only recognizing great organizations for the great work that they do, but being a learning professional does require a lot of discipline. It requires a lot of experience and expertise and a lot of work. And so, we need to take a moment to recognize that work and to also celebrate and have a little fun. Though I think also being a learning professional allows you that ability to be creative and innovative. While it's still a lot of work, you can have fun while you're creating content, right, Drew?
No, absolutely. And that's at heart. You're touching a little bit on the topic of today of creating that fun environment, how to enable that in your organization for sure.
Fantastic. And that's what we are talking about today. We're talking about strategies. Particularly, you've developed 8 strategies or have identified 8 strategies that you have incorporated in your workplace, your work culture, when you had transitioned from an office environment to a remote environment, and how that has been working for you and continues to work effectively for you. A few more things I want to point out until before you get started here and kind of sharing your examples and strategies. Also, NovoEd has received 39 Brandon Hall Group Excellence Awards. So those that were in attendance at our conference and have also been part of our announcements, perhaps or already know that, but those of you that are joining us and do not know that, let's celebrate them again today. And congratulations, and again, congratulations for the great work. And also, we appreciate your partnership once again, not just as a sponsor, but as a platinum provider, as part of our elite membership program, where we have the opportunity to learn about your products throughout the year, and also share research and insights from the market. So it's been a great partnership, and thank you again for being here.
No, it's a mutually enjoyable relationship. So thank you so much for continue to work with us. And we think we're doing really cool stuff. So we like to promote it and win awards. So it feels great to us too.
Fantastic. And Drew, so tell me, how did you get started in the learning industry, and what how did you or how did NovoEd attracted you to them?
Yeah. So probably I feel like I've met a few people in the industry who may have gotten their start in a physical classroom. I started actually in the Bronx, New York, as a middle school teacher, where I taught for 4 years, math, science, English. I was a special educator, and it got me really excited about feeling creative and innovative with curriculum design and the things that I was trying to employ in my classroom to make it highly engaging. Some of the things I found to be really effective were project and group work, creation of music videos. So a colleague and I started an actual, I guess, band name of Remick Harley. He was Mr. Sarley, I'm Mr. Remiker. We recorded a number of math music videos. Kids got invested. They started making their own music videos. And then after several years of teaching, I was invited to essentially educate the rest of the staff around the innovative methods that we were trying in our classroom. And I realized, like, wow, educating adults, I find it to be a little easier, to be honest. Even though you're maybe not facing the same levels of distractions that you might in a middle school classroom, you still have to tangle with people being on their phones and checking their emails. There's still, you have to keep a high level of engagement and keep people engaged and entertained. So I essentially transferred over to working more in the teacher education space, and eventually was attracted over to NovoEd, which is based in the Bay Area where I'm from, and found myself this very happy place where I've been almost 10 years at this point, or maybe, yeah, we'll be 10 years, I think, this fall. And it's been an amazing journey. I started there really as an instructional designer, working with our customers to implement programs on our platform. And then essentially over time, as we grew, had the opportunity to build a team which are comprised of learning experience designers, learning strategists, who now are deployed to our various customers when they're excited to implement NovoEd, often for the first time, over various design projects. So I've been there now, and as you referred to, when I started there in San Francisco, it was quite an exciting experience for me. Going in, we had a cold brew keg. We had lunch together every day. We were chatting. We were vibing. We had little excursions and trips to the museum and happy hours. And then when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden we went remote. We weren't sure how long this would be and when we go back to the office, but there was something certainly lacking because we felt like that was a huge draw to the company, was this amazing in-person culture where people had a good time. We all sat around lunch table together. Back then when there were probably fewer employees as well, but we had a very tight-knit group that spanned different departments. And so the question would be, during the pandemic and as we became fully remote, how are we going to ensure that strong connected culture remains? So that was sort of the, I guess, inspiration for this chat today. And because I think there's some things we've done really well, and hopefully you out there listening, to, if you can identify either one or two of these things to try in your organization, I think it could have an impact.
And how did you, or you were not alone. So a lot of organizations have obviously had to go into a remote work environment, and some were already dabbling there, depending on function, depending on industry. Some had better technologies to help,
Yep.
transition. Now you see some organizations that are migrating back into the office environment. So there's a lot of mixed emotions, but you
Yep.
continue to, you're still fully remote. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think one of the things that enabled us was we actually had a policy called Work from Home Wednesdays. So originally it was entirely in person. Then we dabbled for a couple of years with, let's try remote on Wednesdays and see how we operate. And it gave us kind of the crawl before you walk, before you run, at least legs of like, oh, well, we will communicate on Slack and we'll schedule meetings like this and this sort of a thing. So we had actually almost beta tested it. And then I think we saw some advantages to being able to open up our recruiting efforts, globally and countrywide. I think there's probably a reputation of Bay Area employees just being too expensive, just to say it bluntly. And so being able to look elsewhere in other geographies where people might actually be more suited or just excited about your mission, rather than perhaps another Bay Area startup when you're competing against the Googles and the other organizations around here. So it actually, I think the reason we've stayed remote in part is because now we have employees based all over the country, in New York, and Cleveland, and even engineering teams offshore, Colombia, India, Mexico. So I think as that's become kind of the norm, it's really doesn't make sense for us to have a hybrid or even in-person environment because that's just not where people are anymore. So that's kind of
Sure.
how things have evolved.
So tell me, what are the strategies that you have developed or you've identified?
Yeah. So essentially, I want to connect these 8 strategies and align them to 4 of our core values at NovoEd. We actually have 6, but for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to talk about how these align to 4 of our values, and the 4 being trust, diversity, team, and innovation. So those are kind of the themes that we'll be talking about. But to start, if you're familiar with the most highest quality and highly productive teams, the basis is always trust. And so, how do we manifest that in a remote environment? Well, one of the things, the first strategy is to put it simply: we do icebreakers. We do icebreakers before every meeting as a way to kind of level set and make sure that when you do an icebreaker and ask people about, what is your favorite ice cream? Or if you have an animal out there, a pet, what's the name of that pet? If you don't have a pet, what is a mythical pet you would want? And by just leveling the playing field and getting everyone in kind of this like, oh, we're just playing a game for a second, it does a couple of things. One, it takes the pressure off of everyone feeling like, oh, I have to be extremely professional and say the right thing and not make a mistake. But it's like, no, we're here to have fun and connect as people. But the other thing I think it does in those games is you're inviting everyone to share, which I think can be hard in a remote context when you're like, I don't know if I have the authority here to speak up, or I just got hired. What is the dynamic here? But by saying no, we're encouraging everyone to speak up and share. It allows people who might not otherwise have been willing to share their viewpoint to speak up and say, oh, now that we're getting to the meat of this meeting or this conversation, I feel like I'm encouraged to share. So that's one simple strategy, the strategy that we employ. But probably the most simplest day to apply is something I like to take credit for. I played a lot in college, I played a lot in context, is this idea of a rating game. Imagine you have a Zoom meeting and then you have to encourage people to get off camera, even if they won't, they could still play. But you ask people like, we're going to rate from 1 to 10, some random thing. We are going to rate pickles. And then you have everyone show their fingers. And then when you ask the highest rated and the lowest, okay, justify. John, you're a 1. Why? Never been a fan of pickles. It's always whatever it might be. And then you have the 10 to justify. But then it's almost in an instance, you see a variety of perspectives and takes on things. And then you ask someone else to nominate the next random thing, whether that's the snow, mountains, this musical artist, whatever. And that's something that when we default, they say, do we have an icebreaker? And the company knows, like, well, we just play the rating game and get immediate flash perspectives on everyone's take on ballet, or whatever it might be. So the first strategy that I would encourage is icebreakers and starting a meeting off on a lighthearted, fun flips.
And if I can just ask a question, how much time do you allow for icebreakers? And is the rating game part of the icebreaker as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
rating game, honestly, that one can be done in a minute, maybe 2 minutes. We try not to leave too much time, and I'll be honest, there are 7 groups in the organization, maybe the more customer-facing part that might get more involved, and the game can go maybe 10 minutes into the meeting, and then you're like, are we not enough time for the actual work here? So that is an interesting challenge. But I think in a 30-minute meeting, we try to take that the first 3 minutes to engage in a playful energy like that. And it
Mhm.
also leaves time for people who are running late from, oh, did I miss anything? Only the connecting, joyful part. Now you're going to be here. So it's something we try to not take too long, but again, it's sort of, I would say department depending on the
Right.
willingness to take the game maybe beyond what it should be.
So you're starting exactly on time and then allowing for those couple of minutes where you would be waiting for people that may not be there on time to kind of fill
Exactly.
silence and gap. Okay.
Exactly.
And do you also require everybody to show up on their webcam, or is that optional? How do
We
you?
don't we have a strong encouragement of it, and I
Mhm.
would say it's somewhat department specific. Again, everyone who's customer facing, sales, marketing, customer success, like those people are more willing to get on camera. But even in a rating game, you could say type into the chat. We want to hear your rating. You're not coming up camera, you're not showing us your fingers. You could at least type in a number, please. So it's still, and I think that's the other thing, is to encourage the use of chat, even if people are really unwilling to come off camera. Plus, I
Mhm.
think it's just it's strongly encouraged, not required in our organization.
All right, great. I'm sure I'll have more questions as you continue on
Yeah.
with the rest of your
So
great
yeah,
start.
so I would say these, and as part of the strategy, the creating safe spaces, and it's not just icebreakers. We've also to encourage water cooler talk, the in between talk. You go to the water cooler, you're going to get some coffee, and how was your weekend? Or heard any good music lately? We actually recently downloaded an app called the Donut app that is embedded in Splash, which just prompts water cooler conversation on a somewhat, I think, irregular basis. What's one thing you noticed today outside that caught your attention, and that it's sort of like, as opposed to that being someone in the office who stimulates that conversation with the prompts, it essentially has those prompts. So to help us create those safe spaces even asynchronously on Slack. And then we also have a number of like informal channels that are that are interest based, that are gardening, pets, food. Those are just the ones that I'm personally invested in. There's probably more than I don't even know about, but that's another way that people engage with each other in a remote way. Again, creating safe spaces. You can play games, but you also can just have time for chatter in a work in a work messaging tool that is purely personal and purely for the purpose of connection.
Okay.
Cool. So that's my whole shtick on trust. All right, let's talk about diversity. And again, one of the very cool things about, again, expanding our employee base from a SF based culture to now incorporating people in Colombia and Mexico and India, is that we've got a variety of personalities, perspectives, backgrounds. And there's a question of like, how do we bring this to light? How do we make sure that as an organization, we are ensuring everyone's communication styles and just being aware of, things like what are microaggressions, or how do you incorporate inclusive best practices in Zoom so that you get everyone's voice? Well, we decided to run our own program on our platform, in part to feed our own dog food and say, hey, we should all be learning on NovoEd in cohorts, collaborating. Diversity, equity, inclusion, a great topic for us all to engage in together. So we actually ran this program last year, put, I believe, 3 different cohorts of cross-functional groups into our course to become aware of what our own identities are, what are the different identities of the people in our organization. And it was great to hear these reflections about people confronting like their homogenous environments for the first time in their lives and saying, oh, I didn't realize that really everyone I know and interface with has the same marital status and race and socioeconomic status. And like, I had no idea. And realized, like, yeah, here at NovoEd, we have a lot of diversity in perspective, but also backgrounds, and bringing that to life and connecting people who otherwise might not have even talked about this was another great way to sort of bridge the gap between remote employees who otherwise might have never chatted with each other. So we ran this program, and then we also have a culture committee that specifically highlights the different holidays that are being celebrated throughout the year. And there's always a nice post on Slack that says, hey, today, if you weren't aware, it was this great, amazing holiday, or it's Women's History Month. Here's why this matters. And it's like we're continually educating ourselves about why this a holiday or this celebration is relevant and important to this member of our staff. So those are just some of the ways that we incorporate the celebration of diversity in our organization.
And how many people do you have part of the diversity culture committee?
I think there's about maybe 8 people. It rotates every year, in fact. So there's always a new recruit. Like, let's bring new people in, it's just to get different perspectives. But that's something that's typically established at the beginning of the year. And then there are different ways that they encourage. They even bring in different guest speakers for us to talk at our all hands meeting. But yes, that small group, I think, has a kind of a mandate to ensure that we are aware of different holidays, but also promoting diversity and divergence at NovoEd.
It's interesting too because in the US, you have a lot of diversity in different states, different regions, different neighborhoods. We are very diverse um, uh, not community, but we're a very diverse culture. And when you do work with whether they're clients or they're part of your company, and they are coming from different regions, some of those regions are not as diverse necessarily. But they need to understand kind of the differences across continents or across the
Yeah.
globe. So that's
Yep.
interesting too, because they may not even have the need unless, and now because the way that we are connecting with people, the lines of barriers are becoming less and less through Zoom and technology. So that's even interesting too to take in consideration. They may not have thought much of diversity needs or training within
Yes.
their culture necessarily, but now because they are more engaged across the globe, that they have to understand, or that there is a importance for them to understand kind of the nuances and differences and or maybe similarities. So it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Absolutely. No, it's been really educational for you know us, or for even me as an American, to learn
Mhm.
about all these other holidays and things that are going on. And so, yeah, I think it works kind of both ways for sure. That if we are going to be a global organization, there should be awareness that there can be a lot of there are, yes, as you said, differences and similarities that can sort of connect us together, but to appreciate why, to have a truly innovative culture, you really need to be open to different ways of thinking and making sure everyone's voice is encouraged to be shared.
Okay, so you've talked about trust and diversity. Is there anything else
Yes.
that you focus on as a strategy to promote diversity or embrace
No,
diversity? Or,
those are the main ones. I mean, I think because we had an initiative to make sure that everyone got to experience NovoEd in a cohort model and experience the technology. I think there was benefit to that, but also making it a known point of focus. From the senior leadership, like, hey, if we are going to be this globally diverse organization, we're going to have to learn a few practices and tips and be somewhat cognizant that this is the environment we're in, which requires an additional level of sensitivity, but also education. So we're not clueless that there are things you could say that could be deemed offensive, or there are certain ways that you could dominate in a Zoom call that would preclude other people who might just want to chat from participating. So I think it was helpful to kind of name those things and kind of continually practice those. So those are the keys for diversity. But if we can move on to the next one, I want to talk about team, and that being kind of a crucial component. And obviously in departments, there's sort of like, I don't know, through organizational design, there are teams, sure. But I think there should be effort in creating the most productive, enjoyable, connected team, both inter-department or intra-department, I should say. So amongst your team of marketers, but we also do great things at NovoEd to create inter-team connection. So having both the customer success and the product team feel connected and able to solve problems. Having the marketing team and services team understand how do we, work together. So there's a couple of strategies that we've done, but I'll start with just my team in particular. One of the things we found to be valuable was doing a team-based charter. So whereas the organization has its own vision, mission, and values, we said, well, let's take a microscopic view on how does our team impact this? What is our role at this company? So if we could define perhaps our own motto, our own vision, who are we? We are the world's best designers creating world-class experiences that will win Brandon Hall Awards, right? Like that's who we are as a group. And then writing out statements, well, like how does it look to work with us? How does it feel? What should people be saying when they work with us? And what are these other values maybe that are not named in our core company values? We talked about, well, we're extremely reliable. We are extremely personable. We build relationships. Like these are some of the things. So kind of saying, yeah, we have our own micro identity, I think can be a very powerful exercise that I would encourage even small teams of, 3, 4, 5, whatever, to actually do for themselves. So that's one strategy there.
That's great. We've created a framework as well for a team charter because in our studies we've shown the importance of teams, but also in having a strategy and having kind of an understanding of the rules of the teams and purpose.
Yeah.
And then you kind of recreate these sub charters for maybe more project teams or more specific
Yep.
to a rollout of some type, but having that structure in place and then being able to leverage that as you kind of build those sub projects out are we find in our studies to be crucial in having effective teams and performance.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So a sort of another strategy, we recently established this at kind of the beginning of this year, was what we describe as the weekly vibe check. What's your vibe? How's it going? So we, one of my challenges as a manager and team leader often is to, like, you just want to take care of your people and you want to make sure they're not overworked, overburdened, or bored. So one of the things that we have as a system is, I mean, if you work with consultants or professional services, there's this idea of resource allocation, and everyone kind of indicating like, yeah, what do I predict is my forecast over the next few weeks in terms of the things I'm working on, right? That's a very quantitative approach to looking at someone. Like one of those projects could be incredibly stressful with a really demanding client, whereas one of them's like, yeah, it's going to take me 10 hours, but I'm going to have my headphones on and it's something I can do in my sleep. So there's sort of this emotional component that I realized I wasn't able to see just by looking at like this data chart. So I asked people to share, I asked my team, like on a Monday, it's essentially kind of like the rating game. You're going to give yourself a score of a 1 to 5, 5 being like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the greatest work week of my life. I'm so invested in my projects. I'm so excited about my workload, all the way to 1, like, oh my gosh, my dog's got to go get surgery and there's all these clients that are frustrating me and everything, right? So by doing that, we put it on our team channel to say, this is how I'm feeling this week. And generally things are going okay, 3s, 4s, 5s, everyone's feeling good. And it was amazing the first time someone put out a 1, like, this is rough. I don't have time. And all of a sudden the team jumped in. How can we help? What do we need to do? I'm having a 4, I have a 5 week, I've got to, and then you were able to actually distribute the work and make it so that the person who had a 1 is more like a 2 or 3, person who had a 5 is more like a 4, but trying to, as a team, stay sane and have each other's back. So that's something we started this year that at first we were like, is this even helpful? And then it becomes obviously helpful when someone's like, I need help. So that's something that we have been employing that's been kind of a cool mechanism.
And are they doing the rating of their work? Is this done through an app or through a
So
check?
It's
And each,
literally just so there's two tools. We have a spreadsheet just to keep like a longitudinal record. So like put it in the spreadsheet because we can then look back on the year and think like why were those weeks like what is there any trends we can find and even to simply calculate like the team average. But then it's literally just a Slack post on a Monday and say weekly vibe check everyone. This is what's going on, and then you're able to kind of yeah just sort of and it's a micro description like it's just the number and why, but it's pretty simple. So something you don't even need fancy tools to implement this.
and so basically you're asking each person kind of rate their feelings or their vibes for their work.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And just kind of like your recruiting strategies, being that you're in, still a remote environment, do you look for candidates, or do you hire more experienced individuals, or do you find, or have you been hiring, newer generations to the workplace, or what? And if so, how do they how do you find them acclimating to a remote environment?
Mm, mm. You know, we've got a variety. I mean, I'll say I've seen, if you're talking about, earlier in their career, I would say, yeah, we see that in our sort of product organization or engineering organization. Whereas, with sales and marketing, probably more seasoned, tenured, able to kind of navigate the challenging and complex marketing and sales dynamic. So we see a variety, and to be honest, how they acclimated, I think. So one of my sort of side jobs, given I've been at NovoEd for so long, I'm generally part of this like welcoming committee as people are onboarding, and I often ask them, in their first couple of weeks of work, like, how's it going? How are you feeling so far? With us being remote, and a lot of people share like, wow, like I'm actually really enjoying all of this activity that I'm seeing on Slack. I can enjoy these interest groups. I mean, someone recently was like, I found my people, the gardening Slack community, it was like, they loved it, the fact that that was pre-set up. I think because we've been doing this for a while, it's not like we're brand new and trying to figure out how to do remote. It's like we found a few things that work. But to be honest, I think it also is just dependent on the new hires' willingness to engage and be a part of a community. I think there are some people who, I mean, if they're like, this is not my first job. I'm not here to make friends. I've got my whole established community. I love that I'm remote because as soon as I can log off work, I can go have a dinner party with my neighbors. I think there's different levels of willingness to engage, but know that if you wanted to and create more connection and have a work bestie, the opportunity is here for you and there are avenues to do that. So it's not like we mandate that you're part of this fun-loving remote culture, but for the people who are willing, and I've seen older employees who are excited about engaging in that, and I've seen younger employees who are less excited and just like, no, I've got a dog, I've got my life, I'm here to work, I don't need to be part of the pets channel even. So, but it's sort of just we create the safe spaces, the opportunities for that if it's something you want. And a lot of people say, I do love that. And we've even heard occasionally, it doesn't happen often, but people do leave our organization and talk about how much they miss the culture and the community that they had at NovoEd for sure.
Very nice. And as we wrap up here, do you want to recap the 8 strategies that you've identified, and just to kind of leave our audience with the key things that they should consider?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, one, making that time for games, icebreakers, if you will, but simply in the form of we're not going to talk about work for 3 minutes, and that's okay. I think to celebrate diversity, I think having a specific task force to do that and perhaps run programs and initiatives to address, I mean, It depends obviously on the company culture. I mean, there's some organizations that might be struggling with sort of age gaps or perhaps different familiarities in working in hybrid versus in person. Like you have to probably identify the problem, but then actually run a program to try to address it. I think that's valuable. For teams, running a kind of team-based charter, defining, as you said, Rachel, like what is your sub-team sort of mission, vision, that connects to the broader organization, and doing this sort of like weekly checkpoint, I think could be really valuable for checking in. I think honestly that's what probably was not all eight, though there's a couple more that are brief, that we don't necessarily have to get into today. But the idea is that there are just small tactical things I think you can do to take advantage of your Slack tool, your messaging system, and ways to ensure everyone has an opportunity to connect, whether or not they decide they want to go all in on connecting with their colleagues. So, yeah.
Well, great. Thank you, Drew. And it sounds like it's definitely driven from your leadership and your culture, and you're setting a an avenue or a platform for to engage your people and for them to feel embraced, and also for diversity and for trust and for innovation to all have a place, and especially in a remote environment. I mean, this is something that you can also incorporate in an office culture as well.
Oh,
Just
absolutely.
in person doesn't necessarily mean that you have time for icebreakers or for these different activities. And not that you don't have time, I don't think that you make enough time for it. So it's something to figure out how to incorporate the little things that do make a difference, and that can drive greater engagement um and culture and all the things that help drive what a company wants to do, obviously be effective and be able to perform and serve their clients effectively.
Absolutely. Though I completely agree that even in in-person time, in-person context, you still have to be intentional. You still
Hmm.
have to say this is a focus and make it happen. So absolutely.
Thanks again, Drew, and look forward to staying in touch and seeing you next year. Unless we'll have an opportunity, I'm sure, to connect on more topics. You've been great today. You're a lot of fun to have on our podcast. So, I hope to see you again. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's been fun, and yeah, I think that's part of the thing. Maybe it's my mantra is like, let's just make it fun. I think it was voted in superlatives in my organization, most likely to make work feel like a playground. So I think that's part of my goal, and so hopefully this was entertaining and you can apply some of these strategies if you're listening in today.
Thank you. Take care.